Hello and welcome to the Believe Crew podcast. The business is you. I'm Jaime White, founder of Believe Crew and your host. Let's jump right in. Welcome to today's podcast. We have Dan Auld here with Integrity Flooring, and I'd love to know more about how you got started in business and what you love about what you do.
Yeah. Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here. I've never really had a sure answer of how I got started. I never really set out to be an entrepreneur. That's not what I, envisioned going into the trades. Um, but how I started was I learned the trade when I was 17 is kind of when I started out in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, from a phenomenal boss that I worked for out there. And I grew to love the trade, working um, in hardwood floors specifically. And from then, there was a few life happenings, deployment, and a couple other things. But I came back and started working for another company. Um, Actually, the original owner of Integrity Flooring, he was just starting at that time, so I was there from day one, and kind of helped him grow it. But I wasn't the owner. I wasn't, the manager at that point. I was just it was just me and him at that point, and it wasn't something that I don't think he really decided like, hey, I want to do hardwood floors. He was a builder by trade, I guess, is what he really started in. And then the whole recession happened, and hardwood floors was one of the places that we were still getting work, or he was still getting work. So I went to work for him after deployment, and really started to enjoy it. And it's not that I didn't mind working for him, but I could tell I wanted to do things differently. I really started to enjoy the work and the trade. Um, and he's a great entrepreneur. He's got many businesses, but he, you know, didn't really seem to love it. And I think he would tell you that too. So I kind of pressured him, hey, if you're ever thinking about getting rid of the the business or whatever, let me know. Let me know. I actually did leave at one point, try out something I wanted to do, which was security, armed security. So I worked as an armed security officer at a nuclear plant for a couple of years, and thought that was something I liked. The job looked appealing, but then I worked that job for 2 years and I absolutely hated it. I couldn't stand it. And so I would do some side stuff for my previous boss at that point during that time. And then he just texted me one day, said, I think I'm going to get out of the trade. And so I texted him back, said, don't, I'm going to come back. I'm going to quit this job. So I went back, work for him, and kept putting those seeds out there that, if you're ever interested. And eventually he did, on a Sunday afternoon, texted me and said, hey, come over, we're going to talk about you buying the business. And so that's when Lindsay and I bought the business, um, and we went from there. So that's how
That's
we got our start.
amazing. I love it. And I love that how do I say this? Like looking for opportunities that aren't presenting themselves, right? That seed of suggestion doesn't have to come from only one side. It can come from us
Right.
asking and saying, hey, would this be possible?
Right.
Yeah.
And he did a lot. I mean, anything I kind of brought up, he was very open to, which was awesome, which
Right.
was great. As open as you can be as you're starting a business, right? You're kind of limited to some things. You can't just
Yeah.
go and get the best stuff right away. But um, like I said, he was an entrepreneur. That was just one of, I think at that time, 3 businesses he was running,
Right.
and his focus wasn't always there. And so that's where my focus was, that
Yeah.
was what I did for a living. And um, he I think he always kind of had that in the back of the head, but he had some younger kids and he wanted to make sure that they didn't want the business,
Right.
and so that's kind of where it started. But yeah,
So when you think about that today, how did you have to transition into becoming the entrepreneur?
the last few years, I'd say 2 years that I was working for him, I was doing a lot of the management. I'm not going to say I was running the business completely, because there was a lot of the monetary stuff and the numbers of the business I wasn't involved with, but I was doing a lot of the sales, meeting with customers, wrapping jobs up, ordering materials. So I had that benefit before I took over, and so I got to see how a lot of that worked. Um, and I knew the trade. I
Right.
had done the trade before I even worked for him, so I knew that very well.
But oftentimes, a technician doesn't necessarily put the tool belt down
Right.
and say, okay, I'm ready to move into the next level. I mean, that takes a different type of thinking. So that's why I'm
Hmm.
curious. how that shift happened. But what you're saying is you were already sort of given an opportunity to move into management of sorts, or sales and marketing in a way. And so that sort of
Hmm.
started helping some of the discussions or some of the thought processes that would need to shift.
Right. And I was open. I really liked the idea of running a business once I thought about it more. And I can be pretty competitive. And so if there's something that I want to do, or there's a challenge put in front of me, whether I know how to do it or not, I'll figure it out. Um, and that's one thing I've learned even with our own crew now. Just because they're our top crew leader, our best crew lead, that doesn't make them management material.
Right.
And so I've had to go through that process several times of um, what's the next steps for them, because they're not interested in management, or they're
Mm,
not management material, and where can we help them progress. But for myself, it did interest me. The idea of business did interest me,
hmm
and it wasn't something I really thought about, as a young boy. It's not like I was out to be an entrepreneur, but as I
Right.
fell into those roles, I did grow to love them. Um, and the numbers, I've never been a numbers guy. But when I see them, and you can see what you're putting in, what's coming out, there's a security there. I think that's really where I got it, is the security in knowing the numbers of the business that brought me
hmm
security. Um, and so that's where I think I got invested into the numbers side of the business.
Well, tell me more about that, because I know that you are now into Dave Ramsey and really growing your employees and helping them with their numbers. So, what are some of the
Right.
things that have shifted for you there?
Dave Ramsey kind of happened after business, and when I talk about security, that's why I got into Dave Ramsey. It's not like we were ever really struggling with money, but I didn't know business very well. Um, the emotional aspect of debt, it was something that I wasn't okay with. It's not that I don't mind risk, but I try to minimize risk if you can. And having debt when we bought the business is something that, was, it brought me down. I felt like it didn't let me perform. It was something that was always in the forefront of your mind. And if you could get rid of that, you can run a business differently. You really can. You have a different mindset. But and then transitioning that into the employees, as a young man, I was never really taught anything financially, and I there's a lot of financial classes in high school and college, but they're not teaching the principles of it. Unfortunately, when I see you go to high school, you go to college, and that's you're hearing from one single-minded of a person. That is a person that went to college. That is a person that probably borrowed student loans to go to
Right.
college. And then what trade that, if they're a doctor, they're going to be borrowing money. And
hmm
so that's all that's fed into the younger generations as they go through, because they really don't hear from businessmen that didn't go to college. They really didn't hear from trade school people, the farmer,
Right. It's
other than
about
his
who we
own
surround
kids.
ourselves with, the
Right,
conversations that become normal. Like when I
right.
listen to you and I think about debt free versus, I was in asset based businesses that was a little bit more Robert Kiyosaki style, where it was like
Yeah,
use other people's money. And so,
right.
whatever the conversations are that we're around, that becomes the new normal. And then I'm listening to Dave Ramsey, and it's like, well, it can be done. Like,
Hmm.
got to shift my mindset. And I know what you're saying is true. My son was in a personal finance class, and they told him that debt was normal, credit card debt was normal, school debt was normal, and of course he was a Dave Ramsey fan, so he was like, "Not for
Yeah.
me, not for me."
Right. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's the way those teachers go. That's the way they were taught. And so
right.
that mindset just keeps getting passed down and passed down. And there's not much new thought coming into that series of teaching.
hmm
Um, and for me, I've read Robert Kiyosaki's stuff, and
hmm
everybody's got their own way. I'm not going to say,
Yeah.
debt free is the only single way, but when you're debt free, you have more control. You do.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
I can control more of my finances than, I mean, look at Dave Ramsey's story when he went bankrupt. The bank calling his loans in, everything going on with the government right now. Are student loans getting forgiven, or are they not getting forgiven? And so when you have
Right.
all those things coming into your life, your mind's and your emotion is all over the place. And if you can cut all that stuff out of your life, now I have control of my finances, not to a T.
hmm
There's things that come in everyday life, but I have much more control than depending on a bank or a line of credit or the government or whatever it is. And so putting that onto the employees, um, we offer Dave's financial peace class to all of our employees.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things that they get and that we'll cover for them. It makes a more solid employee. They're not stressed out about money. They're not. It makes a lot of their marriages better.
Right.
And so if that's one thing I learned in the military and being on deployment, if you have a solid foundation, and I do believe that that is where a lot of PTSD issues and stuff come from, are people
Mm-hmm.
that have a lot of other things going on in their life that are happening back home if we're deployed, that aren't
Right.
settled, and then something happens and they all of a sudden have to jump to that mindset. And it's so as an employee,
Mm.
if it gives them more solid foundation, it makes them a better employee. And that's how we feel, and just pouring into
Yeah,
them
not
and
a
helping them out.
distraction.
Right.
Yeah. So you find that they're a more solid employee. I mean, they've got that security, like you've talked about. I mean, if we
Right.
can create that financial stability, then we can make better decisions. We're not coming from a place of fear when we're making decisions,
Mm-hmm.
and really kind of taking the emotion out of it and saying, okay, well, this is a financial decision. So
Yeah.
when you're growing your business, do you sometimes run into those moments where you're like, okay, I'd like to grow in this way, but we're going to need to, or did you, as you were transitioning to debt free, run into those moments where you're like, we're not going to be able to make that investment right now. We're going to have to wait.
Right. 100%. And it is a slower process. I've had people tell me, oh, Robert Kiyosaki's way is faster, or this way is faster. If you borrow money, it's faster. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
there's more risk, there's more variables there. If it works exactly how your plan says it's going to work, it probably is
Mm-hmm.
faster. In the military, we have a saying that says the only reason you make a plan is so you know exactly where something went wrong. And so when things
Great.
go awry, it may or may not be faster. And so for some people, it does work very well. Others it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't. But yes, there has been, we grow at the speed of cash, and so there's been
Right.
some things that we have to hold off on, and it has maybe slowed down growth a little bit, but I feel like it's much more solid growth.
So when you think about how you've had to develop personally, buying out this business and then growing your team, it sounds like you have quite a few team members. How many employees do you have under you now, and what are some of the things that you've had to learn about yourself along the way?
We have 8 team members now, and then myself and my wife, so 8 employees. um, More employees does not always equal more money. It doesn't always equal more work getting done. That's one thing I learned. I think the most we've ever had was 11,
Mhm.
um, and that actually was one of our least profitable years.
Mhm.
A lot of things getting overlooked. So there's some things when hiring too that you just simply can't hire. You can't, or you can, I should say, you can't train. You can't
Mhm.
train desire. You can't train, someone with a work ethic. That desire
Right.
has to be there to get that work ethic first before you can actually train somebody. You can teach somebody processes. You can teach somebody
Right.
systems and standard procedures. And so character means a lot when we're hiring. And there was a time, we would just hire anybody that could come in and work. Oh yes, we have more production, right? But you end up
Mm.
dealing more with personal things, and it takes the bottom line down, and that's not profitable either. So we're kind of stringent with the hiring process
Mm.
when it comes to growth. That was something I had to learn kind of the hard way. And then also with, like I mentioned before, just because we have our best crew lead, that doesn't make him manager material.
Right. Right.
Um, and there are people that are great managers, um, and then there's people that just aren't interested, don't have those thought processes, whatever it may be, but they're better off and probably happier doing
Yeah.
something other than management.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about character and the things that you can't train. Quick Trip, obviously, most of us around here know Quick Trip. Their first question in an interview is, what is the last random act of kindness, or something along those lines? Like,
Hmm.
what was your last random act of kindness? And they said, then we have to train our interviewers on, what does the pause mean? Because sometimes people are going to step back and pause, and it's
Yeah.
because it's not because they haven't done it, but maybe it's because they're so used to being kind that they don't even see themselves that way. Or, so interview questions and learning how to determine, what employees are going to be the right fit for the company. It's what I've seen from you is that you have a certain set of values that you're operating your company from. obviously the name Integrity Flooring kind of says that if we had to pick one, right? That was
I've always
probably the
said
one.
if you want to make something hard for yourself, put integrity before anything you're going to do. It holds you to a
Right.
standard.
I'm envisioning this company with 8 employees that, you really have this strong core and you're interested in that stability and creating that security for people. And so you're building this really strong foundational trade based company. Like in today's society, finding people, usually people are complaining that they can't find someone to work. Would you echo, the same questions or problems that you feel others are saying? Do you hear those same things and feel those same things?
It is hard to hire. And that was one thing we looked into about 2 years ago. We talked about hiring a company that would, recruit or whatever. And at that point, he literally told me, he said, "What is the point? What do you have
Wow.
to offer that it is better than anybody else that's going to bring anybody in?" And that was, the middle of COVID when it was hard to hire, and it still is hard to hire. Um, that was something that um, I learned in building the business from what it was before. Is the mindset before was always kind of hurry up, get the process or the project done as fast as
Hmm.
you can. Just go, 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 type. That's kind of how the business was run at that point, and transitioning that into a place that people want to work.
Right.
At that
Right.
point, there were no employee benefits, time off, things like that weren't really a thing, which it was the start of a company. And so that's quite
Right.
common. It
Right.
does take a lot of work to get that going, but just building a place that people want to be, that they
Mm-hmm.
look forward to coming to work, and just not making it slave driving,
Mm-hmm.
grind all the time. And so setting that kind of, I don't like to use the word culture. That seems like, but that's
Yeah.
what it is. It
Right.
just gets
It
overused,
is.
I feel like.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
um, having that culture,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
other people do notice.
Yeah.
People that we do jobs for notice. Um, the employees tell their friends that are maybe
Right.
on a union job somewhere, and it's just grind, grind, grind. Well, then they care a little bit more than that, and they want a good place
Right.
to work. And so that's kind of where most of our employees come from. I am a little bit lucky that most of our employees are actually military or ex-military, and so that's I've had ties with
Wow.
that, and be able to bring people in that way too.
Wow. That's really cool. I know what you're saying about culture, and the word feels like it's got a little bit overused. But
It's in every
when you
sports locker room around the nation. That's what they talk. So yeah,
and it's a thing.
right.
And when I think about hiring employees and the challenges that come in, yes, there is a challenging environment right now, you could say,
Hmm.
but I would say it's more specific to certain industries. And maybe the reason that those industries are a little bit more challenged is because either A, the culture isn't what people want to be involved in anymore, or
Right.
B, the technology hasn't kept up, or the owners haven't changed the vision of the company to really match today's environment. Like
Right.
when I was hiring people, if I showed them that I was interested in them and growing them, it wasn't about the pay. It wasn't always about the benefits. It was about that I showed an interest in them and their lives.
Hmm.
And then how could they grow and what were the opportunities within the company? And then at what point, did it no longer make sense? And I found those to be amazing conversations. And then you enjoy working together. It's a team environment. We're spending how much time together
Right.
doing amazing things. Why not enjoy it?
Right. Right. And when you have, good group of guys that are
Yeah.
involved with, I mean, it's each other's families really. And that's one thing, going back to helping our employees and giving them a good foundation to work off, is I tell they need to use their time off if possible. That's important, to go spend their
Mm-hmm.
time with their family and make sure
Right.
everything's right over there. Otherwise, you're not going to be, worth what you should be when you come to work. If you're not taking care of those things, just don't be working all the time.
Right.
We have several that are, new fathers and having babies, and so they're in the early stages of that, and just trying to implore them to, take the time off, and and do the right things, be a family man. And that
Mm-hmm.
always comes back and helps them perform better. They feel secure. It shows that, we care, not just
Right.
myself, but other employees, covering for them while they're gone or whatever
Right.
it may be. um, and it's just a team effort. It actually turns into a team
Mm-hmm.
effort. People are, yeah, we'll pick up for him, not, oh,
Yeah.
he was gone last week and he's gone all the time. You don't hear that kind of stuff.
What do you see in the future, maybe a couple years out,
Hmm.
as maybe God's calling for you, or your company?
That's kind of something I've gone through. I've gone through a phase, and now I'm kind of looking around, not really sure what is next. You know, I really enjoy running the business. This last couple of years, I've put managers in place. You know, so I don't have to, you know, do everything, um,
Yeah,
and that has really worked out. And during our debt free journey, that's where our my vision was so much. You know, that's what I
right.
focused on, and I kind of learned something interesting after that. You know, we had everything, personal side and business side, completely debt free, and then I found myself, you know, I knew I needed to focus elsewhere on the family and stuff like that because I was driving so hard.
Right.
And so I was trying to disengage a little bit from the business, and I found
Hmm.
myself needing purpose. You know, I was pulling
Right.
my purpose away is really what I was doing. And so I think I really went about that wrong. Um,
Mm.
you know, I'd get a call from our project manager or something, get a little frustrated, be like, God, you know, you should be taking care of this. Well, the last months or so, I've really realized how much I do need to be engaged in the business,
Right.
not pull it away. But you know, have time for what's right. And you know, I
Hmm.
have changed the way I do things personally after the debt free part of my our story is passed. And so the future, the last couple of months, we've been had the opportunity to get on a few webinars and stuff with the NWFA, the National Wood Forest Association. So just being involved in the educational side of
Right.
the business. We're working with a company that's developing an app that allows us to monitor job sites and things like
Mm.
that remotely.
Yeah.
And so I've been able to be in the development phase of that. And then we hired a production company because we're doing a customer educational video. We feel it's important, and we've seen the results when you actually sit down. You don't sell a customer, but you educate them, and how much that makes them comfortable with the process, and they want to learn more. The customers only want to learn so much. I've learned that. I just thought customers, you know, want to see it, you know, learn as much as they can, and then maybe do it themselves. Well, they get overwhelmed,
Right.
and
Right.
then they're like,
Right. It's
take a
like
step
you do
back.
it.
Yeah, you do it. This is too much.
Yeah.
We're over the
Yep.
edge now. So, really trying to educate the customers, and that's one thing we're putting that video together for. And I've enjoyed that part of the business, not necessarily growing
Hmm.
production wise, but you know, customer service wise and educating. Um, you know, I wouldn't really call it coaching our customers, but just being involved with the educational side of the
Hmm.
business and growing that way, working with other people on different projects. So I would like to go down that route more, you know, being involved with the overall industry and not just our own customers.
Yeah, it sounds like you're embracing the role of visionary, really, which is, to consider new R&D, research
Hmm.
and development on new things that maybe not all the ideas get passed into implementation, but they have
Right,
to be considered at some point.
right.
And who better to do that, than the company visionary to say, hey, this is still in alignment with what we're doing.
Hmm.
And the other piece that comes to mind is when we think about the basic human needs, like you've talked about security and stability, and that is one of the basic human needs, right? We also need a little bit of uncertainty, a little bit of adventure in our lives. Maybe it
Right.
doesn't have to be in form of debt, but for some people that have an addiction to uncertainty
Hmm.
or an unhealthy need, they may like that,
Right.
level of stress and
Yeah.
uncertainty. And then there's, love and connection, which you talk about like with your families and making sure that we still have that connection with other people or in that team inside your environment. And then significance, we all want to have a little bit of like, I mean something, but then the last two, which are actually needs of the spirit, is growth and contribution. And so what I hear
Hmm.
you saying is that you're starting to really lean into those because you've created this healthy um, you know space for certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, and significance. That's kind of like check, 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 check. So
Right.
now, how do I grow and how does my company grow in a way that we can give back and contribute? And that's amazing. That's the most beautiful space to be, because otherwise, like you said, what's my purpose?
Right.
Right? Like that is
Right.
actually a human need. We need that.
Right.
So I love it.
Yes. And you asked about the hiring process. It's hard to hire people. I had a good friend of mine that I talked to. He's a business owner as well. And he mentioned, he's like, you know what, maybe it's not time to hire. And when we're not hiring, there's always growing pains with hiring. And so that's kind of where your focus is when you're trying to grow the numbers side and the people side. But you can sit in the space you're in, and all the problems you're having with that space, we'll try to solve those. And so that's what a lot of the, this job site monitoring company we're working with and stuff like those are problems that wood floor guys have, site conditions not being right. And so we can work in our own little space, and maybe it's not growing in numbers, we're not putting more crews on the road or anything like that, but we're still growing and making that foundation solid.
Wow, that's amazing. So when you think about becoming the business owner that you've become and even becoming the person that you've had to become in order to run the company in a way that's healthy and growing and contributing, is there anything else that you would like to express to somebody that's either thinking about being in business or maybe more importantly, growing from doing the work themselves to adding employees or anything that comes to mind?
There's a few things. One thing I've always thought, and I've realized it's a myth, is the work life balance is not a myth, but it's not 40 40 40. It's not 40 hours a week working 40 hours or 8 I should say, 8 hours a day working, 8 hours of rest and relaxation, 8 hours of family. That doesn't exist. When it comes and goes. When you're growing a business, yeah, you are going to have to put almost all of your time in starting and growing that business. After it gets legs and starts growing, you need to pull back a little bit because you've been cheating something. You've probably cheated your family, or your health, mentally or physically. And so
Yeah.
as you go through business, it's not the same time implemented into each category every single day or every single week or every single month. But those things, you have to focus on what's important at that time. Christy Wright wrote a book. I read her book, and it's Take Back Your Time, I think is the title of that. And that's what she talks about is, I kind of had that realization, and I read the book, and it just solidified it. Um, and then also, once you have an established business and it's grown a little bit, you do need to pull back a little bit. You shouldn't be working 60, 70 hours a week if you're in after you've been in business for 3 to 5 years or whatever. That does need to come back, because you're going to burn yourself out,
Right.
or just change your job roles.
Right.
If you're going to continue, you're going to have to change. If you're going to continue comfortably, you're going to have to make changes as you go. Um, and it does get hard. I would tell someone else starting that they definitely need to surround themselves with like-minded people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the people that are around you speaking at you that's what your thoughts are going to be. And so find the people that you feel are successful, um, and the people that are motivating, the people that speak positively and not negatively, and have somebody that you can really go to and be open with. That is definitely needed.
I love that when you mention about find the people to surround yourself with that are in a way that you define success,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody's definition of success is different. And
Right.
I think that's important because I feel like God's calling us into different things, using our different gifts and talents, raising our families in different ways. It's all good. It's just that how do we find the circle of influence to support us in the way that we're meant to kind of be challenged
Mm-hmm.
and contribute. So I love that. Thank you so much for all of this insight. And I really am inspired by everything that you're doing and the person that you are. And I know that being a person that inspires others sometimes, we don't realize how much of an impact and effect that has on others. I'm really thankful for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it is, and everybody needs somebody, around them.
Right.
And I think that's one thing I do struggle with. Is I'm not a big rah guy.
Right.
I'm not, super energetic. And some people are. You watch them and you're like, man, I just wish I was more that way.
Right.
Um,
Mm-mm.
but there's a place for everybody, and I just try to be consistent. That's the thing I try with. But yeah,
Yeah, that's huge.
it's right.
Yeah, my son,
So,
that's 20, he has been so inspired over the years by people that are similar to you that, maybe have a podcast and share their information. And then he
right.
just waits for their next release.
Yeah.
He's not listening to the rah guys. He's watching
Right.
Spindle spin and, the boring things maybe. Like what I like to ask people when sometimes we want to look at what somebody else has that we don't is what skill or what strength or what gift of yours are you willing to give up to have a different one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes we're not willing to give up something of our own, even if
Right.
we see something in somebody else that maybe we're like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe we should be that way. No, you're
Right.
inspiring, even if it's not rah rah.
it's There's one guy I listen to, Jocko Willink. I'm not
Oh,
sure
I
if you're
love
familiar
that.
with him, but that his wrote that book Extreme Ownership, and he's not a
Absolutely.
very rah guy either, but
No.
just his presence
Yeah.
is something that's solid, and
Yeah.
that the strength there is guys like him are just those are the kind of people I look up to. They're not rah, they're not flashy,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a trust and just a solid foundation there that's really attractive.
Absolutely. I have his book. I've given it out so many times. I think the last copy is still in the plastic.
Right. With
Like, maybe it's time to take the plastic off and make it look like I'm reading it, but I've just
right.
been buying new ones and giving them out.
Yeah, that's one book that I give to all of our employees. Extreme Ownership.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge.
Right.
Reading that when I was in the process of leading employees created a mindset shift that
Mm-hmm.
I needed to have shifted. It was very
Right.
important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I
a
was
tough one. And I mean, they call it extreme ownership for a reason. If
right.
you
Right.
live that lifestyle and that way to a T,
Mm,
we all try to, right? But
right.
that's extreme, but
I
it is
love it.
very beneficial.
Thank you so much
You bet.
for
Thanks,
coming
Jamie.
on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for
And
having
we'll
me.
hope to talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.